Everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Thursday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky, 34 points from Luka Doncic and a buzzer-beating tip-in from LeBron James give the Lakers a 120-119 win over Indiana. Is that going to be the lift they need to get rolling down the stretch? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, sometimes on weekends, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one's always going to be free, never behind paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube, Andy's. We're over 34,000 subscribers are hanging out, talking to us, talking to each other, leaving questions, leaving comments, and they're all talking about Wednesday night's thrilling, strange, totally emotional 120-119 win over the Indiana Pacers, and Indiana Lakers break that three-game losing streak, get a badly needed win on the road. Do want to let everybody know that today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Got 34 from Luka Doncic. They got a buzzer-beating tip-in from LeBron James, 24 from Austin Reaves. When things looked good in this game, they looked really good, and when they didn't, they looked really awful. But in the end, Andy, this feels like at least it's one of those wins that has a potential kind of lift some weight off of a team that I think was carrying a little.
The things that need to be fixed still are in need of fixing. This was not a game where the Lakers looked entirely like themselves, but they looked a lot more like themselves more often in this game.
And I don't want to interrupt you, but also in critical moments, like down the stretch, the offense operated really well.
Yeah, there were definitely some good moments offensively, a couple really big threes from Rui, who ended up getting the start in this game. That looks like it's going to be the case moving forward. We had talked about how we suspected at least that until Rui was able to play enough minutes that JJ felt like I can start him without having to screw with the rotation too much. He was going to be put in there, and that was the case. He didn't get a lot of shots in this game. Would still like him to get more, but the ones that he got, he mostly made, and they were really big. But like, you look at 119 for the Pacers and a couple quarters that were shaky defensively. It is important to remember the Pacers are one of the best offensive teams in the league. They average almost 117 points for the season. Since the All-Star break, they're averaging 118 points a game. They shoot 49% from the field for the season, about 37% from behind the arc. They get to the line. And because Tyrese Halliburton is so good taking care of the ball and has it in his hands all the time, and his backup, TJ McConnell, also doesn't turn the ball over, they're a team that you don't have many opportunities to capitalize on mistakes and get out in transition. Like the Lakers did find some opportunities to run, but I don't want to excuse some of the breakdowns because there were some that frankly, you're going to go through the film session and be like, bro, can't have that happen again. But this is not a team that you should look to hold to 105 points or else the defense sucked.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think, we can get into some of the individual elements of the team and how they played and all that over the course of it, because I think like you said, the defense had moments where, especially when they were able to get into the half court, kind of settled. I think for the most part, it looked pretty good. Certainly JJ Redick, that's one of the things he talked about after the game. The offense, I thought there were a lot of things to like, but I mentioned in the open, like this was just a weird game. You had LeBron James entering the fourth quarter, sitting on 3 points. That does not happen often. The guy has scored 10 points or more every game since 2007.
Sitting not just on 3 points, but 0 field goals. Like, I don't know.
6.
Yeah, I don't know for sure if that is the longest LeBron's ever gone in a game without a basket, but if it's not, it's got to be pretty damn close. Like,
oh, I mean, I don't know how much farther you can go.
This does not happen to LeBron particularly often. We'll get into some of the specifics too. This was also a game from LeBron, and he gets the game-winning tip in, just barely beating the buzzer of a missed floater by Luka. And by the way, this Wednesday, between announcing his revamped Mind the Game podcast now with Steve Nash, absolutely owning the news cycle after an hour-ish sit down with Pat McAfee. Very entertaining sit down, by the way.
He got Stephen A. riled up.
Good Lord. I thought McAfee actually did a really good job.
It was a good interview.
A really good interview. And then this game-winning tip in. Really nice little Wednesday for LeBron. But we'll get into this. I loved this game from LeBron. Not just the tip-in. Obviously, the tip-in was amazing. But I love this game from LeBron.
I'm glad you brought, we spent, and before everyone gets upset, I am not trying to draw an equivalence in terms of the importance, in terms of the whatever. One of the things about sort of the legendary Game 7 with Kobe and the Celtics is, as bad as he was shooting the ball in that game, there was a train wreck in so many ways. Did so many other things to contribute to winning. And LeBron, aside from the low point total and the inefficiency from the offense, he was not struggling in quite the same way, but he was phenomenal on the glass. He was, I think, consistently the best defender the Lakers had on the floor. And he talked after the game, continuing to find ways to impact how to win. This is a lot of the sort of the platitudes you expect from LeBron in terms of, this is how my game is. And he's stuff he said a million times. And I'm able to contribute even when I'm not scoring. And that there are other guys who can do that, and so on and so on and so on and so on and so on. Except A, it's true. And B, it mattered in this game significantly. They don't win if he doesn't do all the other stuff. And I also think it's really, it's something to notice and something to kind of hang your hat on a little bit. It's like, yeah, we're in this game, probably should have been up by more. If you're the Lakers, you're thinking this, with LeBron sitting on 3 points in the fourth quarter. It shows that they can come up with ways to win, and they can stay in games, and they can compete and do all that stuff without having to lean on LeBron as a scorer. They're going to need it. Most games he's going to be able to do that stuff and still have 17 heading into the fourth. I'm not saying 3 points from LeBron after three quarters is ideal. I'm just saying there's a lot of stuff you can look back on if you're the Lakers and say, wow, that's good, in terms of not having to rely on his scoring.
Well, it also just, this was a display of why LeBron, beyond being one of the greatest players of all time, in the conversation on the very short list of greatest of all times, is one of the reasons why he's one of the most versatile and well-rounded players of all time. Because like you mentioned, going into the fourth quarter, he had a near double-double with rebounds and assists. I want to say he was sitting on 7 apiece for both. Yeah. But somewhere in that range.
At least, I think he had the 7 assists, and I think he was at 8 or 9, 7 or 8 or 9, but it was close. Yeah.
Yeah, it was in that range. So he's looking at a potential double-double heading into the fourth, despite having only 3 points. And we mentioned the defense that he played that was often just terrific in this game. And as we've talked about before, LeBron's defensive engagement very often sets the tone for the rest of this team. It often his communication. And LeBron actually talked about it's either after the Orlando loss or a practice in Indiana, just part of getting his conditioning back is actually the ability to keep talking defensively. It's the same way, it's difficult for singers who do a 2.5-hour concert. And also, if they happen to do choreography or whatever, that requires conditioning. That is hard to do with vocalizing. But another piece of this that I loved with LeBron, 0 turnovers after 3 quarters. He didn't get his fourth turn. his first turnover into the fourth quarter.
There you go.
He dribbled the ball off his leg. It was his only turnover of the game. But like things like that help offset a night where you're not scoring, but you have so much control over the game. Again, like this is not a night that in the grand scheme of things, other than the game winner, I think people are going to remember over the course of LeBron's career. But I really loved the game that he had tonight.
Yeah, I agree. And it was coupled with, obviously the attention. LeBron had a great start to the fourth quarter. He was integral in pushing the Lakers at the beginning of the fourth quarter. Obviously had the huge tip in at the end off the Luka miss. But it is worth talking both about the way that Luka, 34 points, big contributor to the win on Wednesday night, but also the way he was able to help generate the quality of the offense the Lakers got in crunch time when they badly needed it. So we'll get into that next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here. FanDuel giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks in bonus bets to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, even who's cutting down the nets. You get to pick your favorites, like, keeping your eye on underdogs, and FanDuel make it easy to get back them with spreads and totals and game props. You can stay in on the action. Tournament games happening almost every day. There's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple and easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. No standing around, no waiting around other than for me to read this. Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. And scene.
Flawless. So quick reminder, Locked On Lakers is not just a show you can subscribe to on iTunes or Spotify or YouTube on the YouTube channel. It is also a newsletter. Go to lockedondaily.com, click on Locked On Lakers, and you can have all of this goodness delivered to your inbox 5 days a week. So yeah, go do that. It's good for us. It's good for you. Everyone wins. The
Plus,
offense,
we need it after I just lost FanDuel.
right? You landed the plane. You just took it off.
I did land the plane.
It was a half hour delayed in taking off. That was
Sure.
the problem.
So, in the grand scheme of air travel these days, that's not bad.
It's not bad. So look, the Lakers came out moving well, getting good shots. It was a nice start to the game offensively, kind of confirming what we had talked about for Wednesday's show, which is when teams try to trap, when teams try to double, the Lakers generally are very effective against that stuff. They generally are able to create good shots because, you're not just passing out of a double team with a point guard. You're doing it with Luka Doncic, or you're doing it with LeBron, or you're doing it with Austin Reaves, and you're also passing to LeBron or Luka, or so like the next pass that follows the one that breaks the press, breaks the trap, whatever it might be, is generally a good one. They got kind of bogged down at different points as the game went along. And what I was really worried about, Andy, one of the things that I think is so encouraging about this is directly related also to Luka. And, Luka was huge early in terms of building up that 34 points. The 3-pointer was working. The step back was working. Down the stretch, it looked to me at least, and you can tell me if you disagree, the Lakers made a little bit of an adjustment, moving the ball higher up on the floor, setting screens higher up on the floor, and forcing Indiana, kind of just creating the space that they needed to use to get downhill, get in the lane, whether by the pass or off the dribble. And that opened up a lot of the space that the Lakers, to create the Rui 3-pointers, LeBron moving the ball, the hockey assists and stuff like that. That all starts with Luka, at the top of the floor. I like the way that the Lakers made an adjustment to how they were doing their offense, how they were operating it. And then, because they needed a good possession basically every trip for the last 5 or 6 minutes of that game. And they got it after a stretch where it looked like they were tightening up and going back into that sort of ISO mode with guys standing and watching.
Yeah, that's a bad habit with this team. And it can be a habit with a lot of teams when things start going bad, you start missing shots, couple bad possessions, you will see teams all the time. Everybody tries doing a little too much, and often doing a little too much means keeping the ball in your hands too much. But you mentioned the part about setting up higher often with Luka. One of the things I liked about it too, because there were games earlier in the Luka era when everyone was learning how to work with each other that they would sometimes they would be setting screens while they were up really high and unintentionally trapping Luka in a lot of ways. They're kind of doing the defense's work for them. They were doing this setting up high and spreading out without actually setting a screen and calling a defender up, and basically doing some of the work where you make these kickouts or passing out of the double that much more difficult. Like they really did do, like you said, a good job spreading out the floor.
If they get into if they can start playing downhill and get into the paint or moving towards it, and it comes again off of a double, off of a trap, off of something, that they are kind of impossible to guard. You're 90% of the time the Lakers are going to end up with a good shot in that. So you're not going to make every one of them. Rui still got to step up and make those late 3-pointers, even having shot the ball, I think 3 times until those shots near the end. That requires, some cojones to do it, but you've got to generate the look. And first and foremost, are you generating good looks? You go back to the game in Orlando, and the Lakers had third quarter problems in that one. They had third quarter problems in this one, but they couldn't get it back going and get those clean looks to keep themselves in the game. Or in the case of the Indiana game, Indiana took I think it was a 4-point lead. Lakers had to come back. Like, they genuinely needed to execute to create the kind of looks that they were getting at the beginning of the game, and they did it. And I'm not going to lie, Andy, I was not confident that they were going to be able to consistently do that down the stretch.
Well, they did a much better job throughout this game moving the ball and not having anybody monopolize it too much, whether you're talking about handling the ball or just the shot distribution. I mentioned earlier, I would have liked Rui to get more shots in this game, but Luka led with 21, and then Reaves had 16, LeBron 12, DFS, Jaxson Hayes 6 of 6 from the field. Hayes, by the way, had a running dunk in this game that after it was an and one dunk that afterwards, like, he looked possessed. Like, he actually looked like bringing an exorcist. The dude's done lost his mind. The devil's taken over. But like, they did a better job in this game setting up Hayes with lobs that didn't feel forced. Jared Vanderbilt, we talked about the last couple games leading up to this, was starting to get really shaky with the ball in his hands, period. Like, just bad things were happening whenever he touched the ball. I thought he had some really nice reads in this game. He had 3 assists, but also just helped move the ball nicely. There was a lot more just cohesion between everyone. And I think also that tone gets set when you see LeBron, Luka, and Austin very obviously looking to move the ball more and being a part of creating a flow. And that flow gets everybody on the same page on both sides of the ball for all the issues they had in the third quarter defensively. And there were some breakdowns at times in the fourth, particularly down the stretch of the fourth. There were 3 possessions in a row that defensively I can promise Luka would like to have back. They held Indiana to 22 points in the second quarter. Like, that is not easy to do.
No. To your point about, Vando and the 3 assists and guys, a lot, again, I think so much of that is built on what's the situation in which those guys get the ball? Are they getting it with a chance, with a player right up in their face? where they have to generate something, create something, put the ball on the floor, and then make a pass? Or are they getting it in open space off of a roll? Because again, the Lakers are ahead of the defense. The ball is moving faster than the defense. If you give Jaxson Hayes, if you give Vanderbilt, those guys an opportunity to make reads in those conditions, they will make the right play. I mean, I think, Vando, he's had a couple really bad games in a row. He helped them. That big second quarter run they made was in part fueled by some big, really big defensive rebounds that Vanderbilt went up and got.
Box out rebounds, really just strong work.
Great plays. And, so I really do feel like the key to unlocking those guys and keeping everybody, it really is how they operate on offense, and the ability to get the ball moving, players moving, and keep the ball ahead of defenses. So, you're not getting guys stuck, and I think that helps on the other end too. But it's interesting that Vando was even in that situation, because we're also talking about Jaxson Hayes. This game was one that I think that reinforced that Hayes is playing well, but also the problem with Hayes being really the only functional center that you have on your team. And so I want to get to that next. Andy, I don't know if we have the disclaimer button ready to go that plus minus is not always a great reflection of everything happening in a game. Please do not use it as the gospel. But Jaxson Hayes with 13 points in 18 minutes, 2 rebounds, an assist, a block, played hard as he always does, was a minus 13 in this game. Jared Vanderbilt, he played 16 minutes. He was a plus 24. Obviously, game flow, all this, that, and whatever. Luka was a minus 16. Take it for what you will. I understand. We get a lot of this in the chat. Why doesn't Hayes play more of this? I get why he doesn't play more. I mean, they are limited in certain things that they can do when Hayes is on the floor. He does provide some of that spacing, the vertical spacing and lob threat and all that stuff. So I think I'd love to see him play a little bit more than 18 minutes. But I don't think you can play him 26, 27, 28. It's hard to finish games with him. And he doesn't really provide tremendous rim protection. He just provides significantly better rim protection than anybody else can.
Yeah, I actually thought in this game, Jaxson had some pretty nice defensive plays around the rim. I think the larger problem is just, beyond the fact that he's not a perfect player. I think in most worlds you would prefer him to be your high quality backup as opposed to your starter. In this game, I actually thought he had some really nice defensive possessions, but the larger point is it's either him or nobody.
Right.
Like, it is very,
you are committed to playing small at that point. And, so you're going to need, to tie it back to the last segment, you need Vando to play some of those minutes. Like, he's going to have to function as a center. LeBron's going to have to function as a center. It's why it's so important that Rui's back and playing effectively, because not that you want to play Rui as a center, they do it, but he needs to be playing at a pretty good level, especially offensively, to help balance some of the defense. He's got to be able to move well enough defensively to mitigate some of his natural sort of weaker points on that side of the ball. It is a tight spot for JJ. The spacing is harder to maintain with Hayes on the floor. You get a little bit of extra vertical stuff or whatever, but it can be hard to do certain things. And so this is going to be one of these push pulls. They can't solve it between now and the end of the year, is kind of hitting the right button of when do we lean a little bit more into Jaxson? When do we go small? If we go small, how are we going to keep the integrity inside? What are we willing to give up? Like those plays you mentioned with Luka, where he was out in space on Halliburton with no rim protection behind him. You might as well just, and I don't mean this as like a dig on Luka, there are a lot of 6'6" guys at his size that can guard Tyrese Halliburton in space. You might as well put 2 points on the board and just keep going. That's not a fair ask of Luka.
And this is also a tough matchup for Jaxson in the sense that there's, to whatever degree you want him protecting the lane against a very specific matchup, Indiana doesn't have that. Like, they have drivers, but they don't have a big that necessarily operates around the rim. Miles Turner, who really came alive in the second half of this game. He was super quiet in the first half, but all of a sudden I think he hit 3 threes on either 3 or 4.
Went on a personal 10-0 run, I think.
Yeah, he went from extremely quiet to going nuts, and Indiana has enough shooters that you either have to pull Jaxson away to some degree and start doing some rotating. And said before, I actually like Jaxson defending a lot in space, but some very quick guys to ask that of him. Like, I think this is a difficult this game, like the Pacers, is a difficult one for Jaxson, period, as a matchup. But I mean, look, that question of how the Lakers can get by with one center they feel confident in has been a recurring question ever since, Anthony Davis was traded or the Mark Williams trade was rescinded. You know, and it's very clear that regardless of whether Christian Coloco and or Trey Jemison III eventually has their two-way contract converted. And side note, this is actually the last game for Jordan Goodwin. So they're going to have to convert his contract to a full NBA contract if he's going to play Thursday in Chicago.
Which they will.
One would think. But
or if it doesn't happen immediately, it will happen pretty quick.
But I was going to say real quick, regardless of whether it's Coloco, whether it's Jemison, or I guess the same effect, if it's neither, JJ in the playoffs is only going to play one of those guys if he absolutely has to. Correct. And it's very clear the standard for absolutely has to is no, really, I absolutely have to.
And that is the right approach because those guys are not your best players. And for the most part, as a coach, you are going to do better when you put better players on the floor. And the matchups may not be ideal and all of this stuff. And I get it. Like, it creates problems. But Jared Vanderbilt, even when he's not playing, he's a better player than Christian Coloco. He's a better player than Trey Jemison. And, you could get a minute or two, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, short shifts. You might be able to do it, but you're not getting far with those other guys. And it's not a knock on them. It is what it is. I do think I want to mention, we haven't talked much about him. Austin Reaves in this game. You want to talk about
wild swings.
Weird game. Austin was 8 of 16 from the floor. Not bad. 1 of 8 from 3. That's terrible. Meaning he was 7 of 8 from 2 and hit all 7 of his free throws. Lakers go on this huge run in the second quarter.
It's basically an Austin
basically run. All him. And one of the things, I don't actually know if I texted it to you, but I certainly thought about it. And I was like, I almost did. I love when Reaves game tonight. It was the difference between some of these other games where he's always aggressive and he'll always take contact. This to me felt like one of those games where he would absorb it when it happened, but he wasn't looking for it. He was playing aggressively. He was getting into the paint. He was using space and change of speeds and all that kind of stuff. And he got a lot of contact with the line 7 times, but he wasn't playing to me like he was looking for fouls, like he was looking for whistles. And there's a difference in just the dynamism with which he plays and the control with which he plays offensively when he plays without looking for fouls.
It's funny you say that, and I wasn't thinking about it in real time, but now that you mention it, neither was Luka. And for that matter, neither was LeBron. Like, all of them, LeBron got to the line 5 times, Luka and Austin 7 apiece. Like, that's neither nothing nor just continual trips to the line. But I think all three of them were not doing anything that even detractors would say was just foul grifting. And if they're not doing that, I think, again, thinking about this in real time, that is something that will also lead to the offense being more cohesive, because sometimes foul grifting leads to a lot of dribble, trying to eventually force the refs to do something, or putting your head down, not looking for a basket, but looking for a whistle. And then at that point, you're dependent on the mood of the ref.
Yeah. And just it takes the team out. It's one thing when they get ISO heavy, which is not great. But sometimes the other team's going to force that. They made an interesting point on the broadcast just about, the way, they can be defended out of a lot of called plays, depending on how switches happen, depending on, all these other things. And, I think everybody who watches these games would love to see a higher level of organized offense and things like that. But if when that becomes difficult, if the other team is sort of daring them to play one-on-one, and look, I mean, if I got to play one-on-one, doing it with Luka Doncic, LeBron James, and Austin Reaves isn't the worst thing in the world. But there's a difference between it does get people standing around when that happens. But even then, the quality of the shot that those guys are able to generate, or what they can then make off that one kick out that you might get before the end of the shot clock, is still better than if they go in there with that feeling of seeking, with the mission of getting to the free throw line, as opposed to, Luka's great at this, Reaves is great at this, recognizing when the defender has made a mistake, getting them in the air, and then, throw it up, get to the line, foul. That's fine. But that's the reaction to the play rather than the goal when you enter the lane. And I think that seems to me to be the distinction you're making, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, what's just essentially on every single possession, what is the intention and how are you going about meeting your intention? Also, we didn't mention it just because in the grand scheme of the game, both he seemed okay and so much else happened, but Austin during the game left for a little bit because he had tweaked an ankle. It wasn't super specific what happened, but he ended up finishing the game. He said afterwards that he's fine. He would be, quote, back at it tomorrow being Thursday in Chicago. So for the time being, it doesn't seem to be anything to worry about. Along the health lines, Rui playing 28 minutes, the most that he's played since returning from his knee strain, again, re-entering the starting lineup. LeBron played 38 minutes in this game, and for whatever issues he had hitting baskets, it was definitely not
wasn't a low energy
physical.
game, that's for sure.
No. So these are good trends, hopefully, as the Lakers close out the next two games of this road trip and try to get themselves in the best form with the playoffs approaching.
Yeah, this was a big win. We'll see how they play in Chicago, whether or not it really changes the nature of it. But it seemed to me like a big weight kind of came off of them over the course of that game. They didn't get a lot of help. The Clippers won, Denver won. So they needed this game, and they need the game in Chicago as well. So we'll see. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can hang out with 34,000 subscribers. All of them love the Lakers, love LeBron and Luka and the gang, just like you do. We, of course, will be back following the game in Chicago. So it doesn't stop, Andy. We are marching towards the playoffs. See everyone tomorrow.